Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, a show that's more fun than a barrel full of money. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and that is a good line, I will say.
Thank you. I just thought of it. Very proud.
That's why you
Um,
don't tell me ahead of time, because then you can get the audience can get my real reaction. Yes, I laugh at dumb jokes.
that was a clever one, though. No, usually they're scoffs that you give me, but this one I got you.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is a special episode because this is the first. I don't know if we're gonna have like a headline for like this is this type of episode. We probably should brand this, but we're
We'll think of that later, like episode breakdown.
yeah, I mean, like that's even pretty good. But anyway, so this episode, what this is going to be like, and we're going to do other episodes like this, is we're going to take very popular episodes of certain TV shows that we watch, and we're just going to talk about that episode. And so, our encouragement, like, if you want to join us in this, feel free. You can watch through the episode Ozymandias from Breaking Bad, the final season. It's the second to last episode. Now, if you've never watched any Breaking Bad, maybe don't do this. Maybe don't
Yeah,
be a part of this because this is like the episode not to watch of
it's
all
like
of the Breaking Bad ones.
it's like the third to last one, I think.
Yeah, it'll
And
give so much away.
yes, it will.
But anyway, for those who have watched Breaking Bad, you're like, hey, I want to get a refresher on that. Definitely feel free to watch that. Come back into this, and then we're just gonna go little by little through the episode. We're just gonna really dive into the meat of this episode. So that makes sense. Brian, are you with me?
I'm with you.
Oh, good. I'm
I
glad my
don't.
co-host understands the concept.
The concept is basically we watched an episode of television, and now we're going to talk about it.
Oh, see, you have a way of making it so much simpler. I over-explain things like
Yeah.
it's nobody's business.
You admit, I listen to so many recap podcasts that I like on a daily basis listen to a podcast where people are talking about some episode of show. I did that multiple times today. So like,
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like this idea is this new concept by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely a fun one that I'm excited to do
yeah,
because this episode is it's one of the greatest episodes
yeah,
of any TV show,
yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, it's the best of both worlds a little bit because hello, Hannah Montana, because it's like the recap podcasts are cool, but also when they're going through the entire series, like you're stuck on talking about one show for like 2 years.
Yeah.
We're not going to be talking about Breaking Bad every week for 2 years. But we do get to break down a specific episode and more in depth.
Yeah. So be looking out for some more of these episodes because we're going to play some of the classics, some highlighted top tier Office episodes, some
And if
great Community, Parks and Rec, all of our favorite TV shows. We're going to find some of the best episodes from there and go in.
yep, and if you have suggestions for episodes to do, let us know.
Yeah, and we always love having special guests, even if you're not so great on the microphone. We would still love to extend you the invitation here and give you like one time. If my son can come on a podcast and do what he did for an entire episode, anyone can do it.
Yep, but they have to want to.
That's true. No, we're gonna make you. We're gonna find you, and you will be on this episode. All right. Well, let's get into Ozymandias. So that's a big word. Like that is a full word. Brian,
Yeah,
do you know why this episode is called Ozymandias?
I do not know, and I don't really bother to care.
So it's based on a poem. Now I'm not gonna pretend like I knew the poem going into this. I should have had it up here too. But I had heard of the poem and I was aware of the reference. And there's actually this image that goes along with this poem because this poem is about Egyptian pharaoh and it is like the ruin of all the great works that they did, and like there's this statue that is like has fallen on its face, like on the side of its face, and they actually kind of recreate the image of that statue with a shot of Walter after Hank gets shot, and like as he falls to his knees in the sand and then he falls down and his head is in the sand, like that is that picture
Mhm.
of the statue. And so the key line from this poem is, my name is Ozymandias, king of kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. So this whole idea is that like all of these mighty works that they've done has come tumbling down, and that's really what this episode is like the unraveling of everything Walter had been working towards in 4.5 seasons, or pretty much 5 seasons, because we're at the
Mhm.
very end
Yeah,
of the the episodes or the run. So let's start off with right away the first scene that we get or maybe should we do lead up because like the previously on was Walt had come out to the desert to get his money because Jesse had made it seem like he had found his money and he was going to like burn it up and light it on fire, but instead it was a trick and they followed Jesse. And so they were able to arrest Walt. Hank finally had him dead to rights. He calls Marie, they have a great phone conversation. It's like, I got him, yay, it's wonderful. And but right before they had arrested him, Walt had called Jack and the other Nazis. That's a fun sentence.
Yep,
To
they're
come
Nazis.
to come in. I mean, they are. There's no skating around it. Like it was very easy for them in the season. Like we need to establish that these guys are bad really, really quickly. Let's just make them Nazis because we don't have time to really develop characters in these bad guys. We
Yeah.
just all know Nazis equal bad.
Yep.
So he calls them and is like, credits Hank. And he calls off Jack and the other Nazis, but they don't get that memo. They're like, no, we're gonna show up, we're gonna see what we can do to help out our good pal Walt.
Yeah.
And so the end of the previous episode ended with the Nazis rolling up and Hank and Gomez were ready for a firefight as they got there. And then this episode starts. So this episode starts here with a flashback to classic season 1 Breaking Bad, one of their first cooks, not their first one, but early on.
Yeah.
And they're talking back and forth. So Brian, give me your thoughts on this scene that we started off with.
Well, it is interesting and jarring because you just watched this huge big firefight where Farley and you just get like pulled back to this whole like very early on dynamic of Walt and Jesse, and you even see the hints of what Walter's going to become. So in the beginning, Walter was not nearly as like control freak. I'm the greatest. How dare anyone talk? But he's not like that at the beginning.
Yeah.
But you see hints of that forming even then when like Jesse starts smoking. He's like, not here. And he's like, well, yeah, I'm not an idiot. He's like, yeah, like you're an idiot. And it's like you can tell right from the beginning, even though he needs Jesse, he sought out Jesse to get into this business. He's still like, no, but I'm better than you. And how dare you think that? And those hints are forming way before you get to like, he has to kill everybody who doesn't agree with him.
Yeah, this scene is also a really good testament to both the writing of the characters and also the acting of both Aaron Paul and especially Bryan Cranston, because there is a marked difference in how these characters are acting in this flashback versus how they act in this present season. Yeah. And it's almost, I don't know if refreshing is the right word, but like, he walks out and he makes this phone call with Skylar and you're like, oh, it's kind of cute a little bit, even though he's lying to her, even though it's like, all the things that are going to happen, but you still see like he does have that caring for her and he like it's the reminder of his family and that he's hearing for the first time she's like, I think we're going to name our daughter Holly because she's pregnant at the time. So there's some sweet moments in it, and it's just really interesting to see Bryan Cranston be season 1 Walter White when we've just been watching him be season 5 Walter White, and it really is this huge difference in demeanor.
Oh, it is for sure. If you showed somebody just that scene, you cut around it, so like all you see was the phone call. You don't know about the meth or anything. They might think, oh, this is a cute couple.
Yeah. I also like that they did I don't know what the initial idea was for this soft opening, because there's two things that this soft opening does. It, first of all, like it sets that theme that's going to pay off again at the end when Walt is screaming after like the knife fight. He's like, what are you doing? We're a family. And it's this great like juxtaposition of that line versus him actually thinking he can hold together being a family with this new meth business that he is starting and pursuing.
Yeah.
So it does that, but then it also has that interesting camera angle right when he calls that it shows the rack of knives right next to the phone, and it gives that great, it's the Chekhov knife of like that great foreshadowing that I remember when watching, I'm like, those knives are very ominous, and I get this feeling we're going to see those knives again in this episode.
Yeah, I didn't notice that because I was watching this episode on my phone while I was cooking dinner, so I was listening, but I wasn't watching as closely. Otherwise, I might have picked that up as well.
Yeah. And I picked it up the first time watching it. Like that's why I remember that detail so vividly, is it
Hmm.
just immediately stood out to me. And it did. It paid off.
Yeah.
So after this scene, there's something missing, actually. This is the only episode in Breaking Bad history that doesn't have what, Brian?
Oh, does it not have the theme song opening where it
It
goes bloom, bloom, bloom?
Nope. It does not have the title card. In fact, the credits don't start rolling across the bottom of the screen like how it does early on in each episode. It
Yeah.
doesn't start doing that until about like 15 minutes in, after the huge altercation in the desert with him. And I think that's the right choice too. I think it was the like, of course they needed to have the credits, and i I
Yeah.
felt they're like, where do we put these? It's like we have to put it in the middle of the episode. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But to go immediately from that soft opening into the gunshots in the desert, I thought was the right choice, especially
Hmm.
for this episode.
Yeah. And this is amazing acting by Dean Norris, like I say, who played Hank. Because I
Yep.
mean, Hank, the whole series has been this like gung ho, like I'm never gonna give up. You're never gonna get rid of me. I'm like a cockroach. And then in that moment, I mean, I think a big part of it is seeing his Steve Gomez dead, who was his right hand man. Like they could jab at each other, but they always knew they had each other's backs,
Yeah.
and that was a big part of it. He just knew there is no way out of this. He, like when he looks up and he says, "Do what you're gonna do," and like he doesn't even get the word out, "do" out, and you hear the gunshot.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what a great way to go out. I'm gonna back up real quick for just a second, because
Yeah.
you talk about Gomez dying, and this is the other thing that's missing in this episode. We hear the gunshots, but we don't see the firefight. How do you feel, Brian? Do you think that it was a good thing to not have the action centric part of it and just to skip over it and be like, okay, we know what happened. We just kind of get the end of that shootout. Or did you feel like something was missing by them not having that?
Well, I didn't watch the previous episode. I thought that we saw the firefight in the previous episode. Did we not see Steve die?
Nope. So what we saw in the previous episode is that the Nazis were pulling up, and like then Gomez and Hank took defensive positions. Like Gomez cocks the shotgun, like it's like, oh snap, something's gonna go down. But we never actually see the firefight.
Hmm. I don't know. It's either going either way because it's also just seeing the firefight would also eliminate any doubt of like, oh, is Steve actually alive? We didn't
Yeah.
see it. We don't know what happened. But I mean, spoiler alert, he's not alive.
Yeah.
But it also,
Sorry, he gone.
yeah. But sometimes it is better to leave it up to imagination. So I can kind of see it from both points of view. I think either way could have worked. And I don't think either way would have made this a less episode, but I kind of agree with the way they did it.
Yeah, because it's not like they don't know how to film violence or shootouts or to make it. Because I mean, one of the best scenes in the whole series, really tight scene, was the Hank versus the twins
Oh yeah.
shootout in the car. Like that's such a well crafted scene, and it was very tense the entire time through. So it's like they know how to do a good action sequence. But I think that this was the right choice, especially because I did feel like this episode had a lot in it, and like they had to get to everything that they wanted to do in this episode, and that probably would have just inflated the runtime too much.
Yeah.
So I get that, but I also think that the other reason for that is because not seeing Gomez get killed and just seeing his dead body makes it so that the first person that we see actually getting killed in this episode is Hank. And
Mm-hmm.
then that death resonates with us so much. I now we can get kind of to that point, because like you were talking, that's some great acting by
Mm-hmm.
him. Especially, I love that line. You're right. His last line, "Do what you're going to do," but the line leading up to that is like, "Walt, you're the smartest person I know, and even you're too stupid to understand that he made up his mind 10 minutes ago."
Yeah.
Like, oh man, that gets you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for him saying he's my family, these guys are not the ones that had to appeal to family. They don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Walt
mean,
made.
the
Go
money
ahead.
maybe, yeah, the money maybe would have been a thing, but then also it's like, well, what would be to stop them from just like they did, just stealing the money and killing him anyways?
Exactly. Walt, in his emotional arguing, he became really stupid in this scene. And it makes sense because he's pleading for his brother-in-law's life. Walt is no longer the smartest guy in the room in this way. He's not the controlling because he doesn't have an ace up the sleeve. This is one of the first times that we see in the series that Walt doesn't have some sort of ace up his sleeve that he's going to pull out. He is just desperate and needy and fighting for Hank's life. And he does these dumb things like lets them know, hey, you're standing on $80 million and you all have guns. There's nothing I can do. So it's like he doesn't think through these consequences. He's just trying anything he can to save Hank's life.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like, as bad as Walt is now, and he does deserve a lot of the stuff that he gets and the recompense that he gets.
Yeah.
This is the most admirable that we see him be in season 5, apart from at the very end when he finally comes to terms with everything.
Yeah.
Is him fighting tooth and nail to save Hank.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So then and I know that didn't Dean Norris ask to be killed off earlier, and they told him, no, we need to save you for this moment. If I remember correctly.
I actually don't know that. I don't know that.
I could be wrong, but I thought I remembered hearing that he asked because there was something else he wanted to do, and so he asked, like, "Hey, any chance you can kill off Hank?" And they told him no, and that's the right move. This was the right time to kill off Hank.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Hank is the hardest death. Like, weirdly enough, Gale is a hard death too, because even though he's in the game, so to speak, of using Mike's language, like, he still is so naive and innocent-ish that it's like he doesn't have, even though he's making meth, he's like a kid, it's just like a child, like, in his optimism and his nerdiness. And so, like, the unfairness that it was for him to get shot by Jesse that's a hard death. But
one thing with Hank is, like, Hank was not in the game in, like, the criminal sense, but he was deep in it with the DEA, seeing all of this stuff. But with him, his, like, collective, his, like, safe bubble that he could go back to and recharge was Marie, Walt, Skyler, and Walter Jr. Like, that, his family unit were, like, the people he was closest to and, like, people he felt safe with. And that until like very late on, when he realized that who Walter was, like, Walt was his closest confidant, aside from maybe Steve Gomez and his wife.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the relationship between Hank and Walt is so well done throughout the series. Mm-hmm. And I also really like Hank's arc after he kills Tuco. Like, from that, because in the first season and parts of the second season, he's a bit of the to use this term, toxic masculinity type, and like the jocko, and like full of himself, head up his own butt, and it's not easy to root with him early on, but then he starts to, like, go through some crap, and, like, all the things that he deals with, he becomes a guy that is worth rooting for. And so to see him go out this way, it's like that's in line with his character, but it's still hard to watch.
It's interesting, like, with the way he was after Tuco, it almost sounds like he's reeling after, like, the first time he ever had to kill a person. But with Hank's level in law enforcement, you don't think he's ever had to kill a criminal before? You don't think he's ever had that before?
I would imagine he would have had to have some sort of altercation like that, but I think, like, I that does feel like that's what the writers were trying to say, is that was the first kill he's had. But I could also see it being the case where it's like he arrives on this scene but is unaware of what he's walking into, because I think he was looking for Walt at that time, and he wasn't on any sort of DEA business.
I think was he looking for Walt, or was he looking for Jesse?
Jesse. Like, not knowing what he was walking into, and it turned into that firefight. I think that's the thing that jarred him so much, is how quickly that turnaround happened, and like that at any moment he could be out.
For sure.
Yeah. So speaking of Jesse, this scene doesn't get done with Hank dying. Of course, they're going to take the money, and then Walt, in one of his worst things that he does in this episode, is in his pain and hurt that he's feeling, he suddenly turns like, "You still owe me for Jesse." And he knows where Jesse's at. He knows he's hiding under the car, and he calls him out. And then the Nazis take Jesse. They're going to kill him. He's like, well, and then Todd kind of actually saves his life, of saying, he might know things about what he told the DEA. We should get some stuff out of him. But obviously we see that they want him to cook as well. But then the final thing is the other thing that we've been waiting for about 3 seasons or 2.5 seasons now is for Walt to tell Jesse that he was there when Jane died. And he does it in the meanest, worst way possible to make his words really hurt before Jesse's going to get taken off to what he thinks is his death.
Yeah.
The most vicious way that relationship could end was through what happened there.
Yeah. Was that because did Walt blame Jesse for what happened? Like, what was such the animosity that like he had to hurt him?
That's got to be it, because if you think back to where they're at, Jesse turned on Walt and like went to Hank about this, or maybe like Hank came to Jesse too, but like I think that Walt will blame Jesse instead of himself to say if you wouldn't have gone to Hank, he would have still been alive. And so it's that misplaced blame and anger to say Jesse needs to die, and also die knowing that I let his girlfriend die.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's one of that's like, it's like if there's a top moments, memorable moments, there's so many that will come from this episode.
Absolutely, because again, it's like you finish up the arc of Hank. You have him tell about Jane. That is an arc in itself, and we're going to get to it in a couple minutes. But there's also a Skylar and Marie arc that, if you actually pay attention to kind of how the next 2 episodes go, this really is the end of both Skylar and Marie's arc. So it's like you wrapped up 3 characters all in one episode, as well as the things that happen in it. So there's some heavy lifting going on with this episode.
Well, I mean, like unless you count way later on, Marie gets a little bit more closure at the end of Better Call Saul, but that's not going to happen for quite a while. Yeah,
exactly. They had to give her closing in this show, but then to also bring her back to get a little bit more of something. Well, also that's more than a cameo. So,
Well, and Maria's kind of been a little bit of an annoying character at different times. Like a lot of times, it's not that you're rooting against Marie. Just like a lot of times, like I don't really care about Maurice, But then she again, great acting all around in this episode. When she breaks down, hearing Walt say, "You'll never see Hank again," like you feel for her in that moment.
Yeah. So that's in 2 scenes. We'll get to Marie. The next scene is very.
I keep skipping ahead.
No, that's all right. It's our podcast. We can do whatever we want. The next scene isn't too long, but it's him moving his barrel of money across the desert to. Oh crud! I was gonna look up the song because like there was a song that plays while he's doing it that was. It's some sort of reference, and it's been a while. I'm sorry. It's some sort of reference to like this intentional idea about this dung beetle like rolling its crap across the desert. I don't remember what the song was, and maybe I'm just pulling stuff out of my butt from when I first was looking into this episode a long time ago. But eventually he meets a Native American that is out in the middle of this desert. He's got a truck, and Walt buys the truck from him. Not a whole lot in this to talk about, unless you have more to say about that song that I don't know anything about.
Not about the song, but the implication is the guy says the truck's not for sale because he's in the middle of the desert. He needs the truck to get supplies to live. And of course, Walt's got like endless money. He just, but then, okay, you're stuck in the middle of the desert with all this money. Don't you still need a car? Because you're going to run out of food eventually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he at least has like what? He probably has a way of communicating. Plus, he might be a part of a community because there's possible that this was out near a reservation territory. Yeah.
So he'd call and be like, come give me a ride. I'll make it worth the Uber trip.
I got me some monies now. So
because Ubers are not cheap.
No, they are not. All right, so we'll get to be at Marie now. So Marie does come to the car wash where Skylar's trying to get a hold of Walt, not able to get a hold of him. Marie shows up. Skylar's surprised. And this all happens in front of Walt Jr., who still doesn't know anything. So Skylar's trying to get out of like having a meeting with her, and she's like, no, we're going to meet in your office. Walt Jr. can watch everything. So they go into the office, and Marie tells Skylar, hey, we have Walt dead to rights. We've got him. And then they have a really good scene where a lot of motivation for what Skylar does in this episode, and her I don't want to say retribution. What's the like redemption. There you go. That's the RE word that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Her redemption a little bit later in this episode of standing up to Walt comes from her talk with Marie, where Marie's like, I don't even know who you are anymore. What have you done? I can't believe that you would be with Walt, but then, or like support him in this. And then
Yeah.
she's like, but then I remember how mad you got at Walt and how you left the house and tried to take the kids. And it's like, maybe there's the Skylar I knew somewhere in there. So I now have the upper hand because I know Walt has been arrested. So you destroy the
Yeah.
copies of that tape they made a couple episodes before, trying to blame Hank for everything. And you let me take Holly and Walt Jr. and we'll see if we can avoid you going to prison.
And you can see it's heartbreaking for us as the audience because we know that Hank is dead, and she doesn't know that. And like, she thinks she has the upper hand, but I mean, unbeknownst to her, she really doesn't. And and then also, this is the first time that in a minute, like Walt Jr. ever knows that his family's involved in this. I think he only found out about any of the drug business when it was Gus Fring. And he was like, "Hey, Dad, look, Gus Fring on TV. He was in meth business." I remember that line. And now it's like, "Oh crap, it's my dad."
Yeah, absolutely. And so, that's the other thing is that Marie tells Skylar that she will bring Walt Jr. into the office. They're going to explain everything to him, and then that's going to be what we see next. But Skylar here, like, this and the scene that's going to follow next with Walt Jr. is what dictates what she does when Walt shows up at the house. Is that she finally holds a mirror because she's kind of become numb to the circumstance that she's in. She had been trying to fight it, couldn't fight it. She tried to do her best to join it to mitigate the pain as much as possible and maybe do some good with that money. That didn't work. She's tried so much. And now I think she's just at the point because there was one of these episodes where she talked about killing off Jesse, and Walt's like, we're not going to do that. She's like, you've killed so many people. What's one more? Like she realizes the depth of what they're into, even if Walt's like, no, we can still make all this work. Yeah. So to finally have that light shine on her from her sister of saying, like telling her all the things that she's been feeling, like, you fought him at one point, so there is that part of you that doesn't want to go along with this. Listen to that side of you. And so that's a good thing for Skylar, even if we didn't like her at the time. We've had our complaints with how she was written, but again, it's like she's not in the wrong. She's just it's a poor character. It's a tragic character.
Well, I still say, like, people like to say, "Oh, Skylar's terrible." If your spouse was cooking meth and it was a criminal empire, you probably would want them to stop it as well. The whole point is that we, as an audience, a third party, we want to see what's happening. That's why we think of her as a villain. But in reality, we would be Skylar.
Yeah. Or I hope we'd be Skylar. I hope we'd be like, hey, you know what? This meth and killing business, this should probably stop now. Okay.
We're in the high profit world of podcasting to hide our meth business.
That's what it is. I hope the FBI is not or the IRS is not listening because they can nail us on tax evasion.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at that. Matt is in a deluxe closet right now. Mean, you got hangers over there and hangers over there.
I know, guys, this is a walk-in. I can walk in this closet. I am high class, bougie, so to speak. Oh man, this high-end podcast studio that I'm sitting in, a recording studio. So the next scene is, as I referenced, very short, but it's her riding home with Walt Jr. and Walt Jr. is just talking about like how could, like, he's trying to process and he's verbally processing, and he starts calling his dad like a monster. Like, how could he be that? How could he be like that kind of monster? And like Walt Jr., there's no black and white with him, or there's no gray with him. It's all black and white. Yeah. And so for him to be processing and talking about like how evil this sort of these things are, because he's also a little in denial. So he's like, I don't know if that's, he did that, but he pretty much is saying, like, if you went along with this, if these things are true, you would have to be a monster. And Skylar, like, hearing that first from her sister and then hearing it out of her own son's mouth of like, what have I been party to? And I'm sure she has so much blame and guilt, even though she tried to get out of it. Like, that ride home was hard.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So then they get home, and then this is the huge moment in the show. Like this is a
Yeah.
longer scene. There's that desert scene that was really long, and then this scene is decently long when Walt's there. He's telling him to pack a bag, trying to get him to leave, and Walt's and they go in the house, and Skylar is not like listening, and she just needs to know where's Hank, because like she tells him he wouldn't let you go. He had you arrested. I know he arrested you.
Yeah.
He wouldn't just let you go. So what
Mhm.
happened to him? And she
Yeah.
keeps pushing until she gets an answer and finds out that he did indeed. Oh, I don't know if she believes it. He says, I tried to save him. So she knows Hank died. What do you think? Do
Well,
you think she thinks he killed him?
I think the second she saw Walt, like the pit in her stomach, I think she like knew that that was most likely the case, and was because you said Hank would never. She knows Hank would never let him go.
Yep.
She's probably running through her mind like maybe Hank's not dead. Maybe Walt kidnapped him, which in her mind would be better because then hopefully they can still like get him out of there and save him. And I think when Walt says I tried to save him, then I think she doesn't know what happened. I mean, she's not thinking, oh, Nazis killed him. But at
Yeah.
that moment, she's probably like, she knows.
Yeah.
Because that's when she breaks down, and that's when I think that might be the catalyst of her grabbing the knife and killing Walt, or
Yeah.
trying to kill Walt. Walt does not die from a knife wound. I will say.
Did you watch the show? I don't know. Yeah. I definitely agree because like Walt says, when he's trying to hold together, it's like, oh, I was able to negotiate. And Skylar, enough of the BS. She's
Mm,
just knows because she knows every lie that he tells. She
yeah.
knows when it's a lie, even if she doesn't always know what the truth is. And
Mm,
she's like, you negotiated? No. What happened to Hank? And
yeah.
she even says point blank is like, you killed him. You killed him to like try and get, and
Yeah.
that's when he breaks like, no, I tried to save him. And
Yeah.
as I watch that, I'm not sure if I like I don't know what Skylar would believe in that.
Yeah.
I don't know if she knows enough anymore of who Walt is to know what he's capable of. It like because she's afraid of him. She
Yeah.
knows that he has done horrible things. And she knows that killing isn't outside of his purview.
Yeah.
So to see how far he went, I think Skylar probably would still think he's dead. But even if she didn't, she
Yeah.
knows that it's his fault he's dead. Whether he
Yes.
pulled the trigger or not, 100% it is his fault she died or he died.
And I don't think I think she knows that Walt would never kill her or Walter Jr. or Holly, but I still think that she recognizes like no matter like, we cannot just first of all obviously with the emotions of Hank and everything. She also knows if we let Walter to stay in our lives, this will come back on all of us at some point. This has to end now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where that closure of her arc is because ever since the beginning, her arc was finding out about it, and her trying to see what Walt's up to, and then her coming to terms with Walt in this world and how she reacts to it. And finally is able to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to let this happen to me and my family anymore. And so I really like the tenseness of that because like we talked about how they didn't have the shootout scene, but they did take their time with letting them have their fight and the knife there. When I first watched this, did you have the same thing? Did you think that somehow Walt Jr. was going to die from them fighting and having the knife and it going there and him trying to get involved? Did you think that they're going to do that?
I didn't, but looking back, I can totally see how you would think that.
Yeah.
That would be dark for this show because oh no, I suppose no, they already did kill a kid with or no, they kill no, they didn't kill a kid. Brock
Um,
almost died.
yeah, they almost did that at the end
Or
of
no,
season one.
they did the kid on the bike.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They killed the kid a couple episodes before. But no, actually, the way that season one was supposed to end, it was supposed to be like how they had Crazy Eight in the basement. That
Yeah,
somehow he was like Walter Jr. was supposed to find him. And then Walter Jr. and him were going to develop a bond. And then Walt Jr. was going to try and stop his dad from killing Crazy Eight. And in stopping that, Crazy Eight kills Walt Jr. That was what their original idea was going into season one that they were going to do. And they ended up going a different way. And I think that it works. But
yeah,
I could definitely see them making that storyline work well. So I think I had that in the back of my mind of like, I think I'd kill Walt Jr., but they didn't. They didn't. But the big
Yeah.
shock I had when they're doing this scene was when he absconds with Holly and he takes her and they go, and just the heartbreak of Skylar realizing what's going on and trying to chase after him and screaming to get
Mhm.
Holly back. Oh man. Like that was such a good scene, the whole thing.
So obviously, him taking Holly leads to her calling the police and the hostage situation, and then monitoring the phone. Did he plan that all out in that moment? Did he think like, okay, if I take Holly, she's going to call the police, and because that leads up to another big scene with the phone call, which we'll get to. Which I don't
Yep.
know if that phone call would have happened without him taking Holly. Did he plan that all in advance?
No, I don't think so. I think this episode was, for the first time, everything was out of Walt's hands and him scrambling to pick up the pieces. He has been able to connive and manipulate and outsmart his way out of tough situations over 4.5 seasons. And this was the episode when everything just was boiling up like this giant pressure. Because early on in season one, when he's teaching in a classroom, he talks about how like chemistry, this the science of change, and like there's like all this stuff that mounts up, and then this
Yeah,
catalyst can start things that eventually it all boils up and creates this giant like explosion or some big thing that happens. And that was the metaphor for this show. It was a slow build in some ways to get to here, and everything falls apart really quick.
yeah, and that's something like you think in that moment, that early scene where he's talking about the chemical combustion change. Do they? I mean, do they know right away like that's going to be kind of the allegory of the show?
I think so. I think that they maybe didn't have all the pieces in place. Well, for sure,
Yeah.
you don't plan out 5 seasons of a show, but
Mhm.
I think that they knew that whatever was going to happen, it has to result in an explosive end.
Yeah.
That you can't like you can't get into this lifestyle without eventually everything blowing up in your face, and that was always the intention, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the next scene, real quick, I just wanted to highlight. We talked about this line earlier, but I want you to give voice to it in your opinion, if you would. So after the fight, then Walt Jr. is right there with the knife and like blocking his mom,
Yeah.
and then Walt gives that line of like, "What are you doing? We're a family," and then you
Yeah.
just see the pain in his face. Give voice to what you think he's thinking after he says that. What you think?
Walt.
Yeah,
I think it's in desperation. I think if he like would take a breath, think about it, like, well, yeah, after everything had happened, Hank's dead. Like, of course, my family's going to be like this. I think in his moment, he's thinking about everything he's gone through since the very first cook with Jesse. Like, all of this was for setting his family up for success or to be able to live after he died with cancer. And
yeah,
for them to be turning on him, it just seems like everything he's done is for nothing. And that's just
yeah,
so frustrating, especially for someone who is also a control freak. He's like, "What do you mean? I did this all for you. You can't."
yeah.
He's basically saying like, "You can't turn this away because otherwise my life is meaningless." Because he basically thinks that his life, ever since he left Gray Matter, was meaningless.
Yeah, that's a great summation of what he's saying and what he's feeling. Because I think that's why that I love that scene in the finale and why it's so important when he visits Skylar and she's like, "If you tell me that this was for the family one more time," and he's finally able to say, "No, this was for me." And I do believe that he was in denial for a long time about it
Yeah,
until even in this moment, he's still in denial, thinking, "I'm doing this for them. I'm doing
yeah,
this for them." And when he finally is sitting alone in, I think Vermont is where they
yeah.
shove him, when he's sitting alone there for almost a year
Mm-hmm.
and just having nothing to do but think about what he's done, then he realizes, no, I did it because of me. There was
Yeah.
other things I could have done for my family. So
Yeah, I mean, I think in the very beginning he started out being first family, but it changed, and I don't know if there's a specific point where it changed, but like all the different
yeah,
stuff where things would have gone a lot smoother if he could get his own ego out of the way. That's
yep,
the kind of thing. If it was truly for your family, then you could put your ego aside and do what needs to be done for them. But it
yep.
was for him at some point. I'm not sure at what point.
He had the out with Elliot and Gretchen offering to pay for his treatment. I get that would have been the biggest pride to swallow because he had that huge chip on his shoulder that their money in his eyes should have been his money or at least a part of their money should have been his money.
Yeah.
And so, he does have that pain. I get that that would have been hard for him to do, but he had the out
Yeah.
all along. He had it. So, okay, the next scene is very short, but I wanted to highlight it because there's a behind the scenes that I think is great. So it does show a very brief scene of him changing Holly while they're on the road as he's escaping. And then, he's talking kind to her because it's the only person he has left in his life. And the first words that she says, I was holding her, she says, "Mom" or "Mommy." Now, what people don't realize probably about that scene is that when you're filming with infants, usually you're going to have the parents just off screen because they are there to help with the kid and calm them down so that they can, go back to filming and do what they need. So this baby saw her actual mom off screen and called out to her mom. That wasn't scripted. And so Bryan Cranston then hears his daughter in the show say "mommy," and so he reacts like she's calling for him. Like, he just acts crestfallen, which was exactly what should have happened. And it was a great stroke of luck that this kid had this improvised line.
That's awesome. That was not planned.
That wasn't planned.
So I just watched that. Like, of course that fits right in. I never would have crossed my mind that would not be scripted.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to call attention to that scene, because that is like, it ends up being, in my opinion, the reason why he leaves Holly there. I don't know if I'd say it's the reason for the phone call, but it definitely would be the reason that he leaves Holly at the fire station. But now it's that big moment. This episode had 3 huge scenes that are just so good, and this phone call is the third one of the episode. And so Walt calls while he knows that the FBI is there, or the DEA and the cops and etc. That they're there listening in on the phone conversation. So in this last ditch attempt to try and take the heat off of his wife so that she wouldn't go down for the things he did, he makes it sound, as he's yelling at her and chastising her, that he had been manipulating her all along, and that the only reason she didn't go to the cops earlier was because she was afraid for her life and the life of her kids.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, like, this is the only chance he has to say goodbye, and he doesn't even get to say goodbye like in any sort of caring fashion, because he has to be chewing her out, he has to be threatening her, he has to say what he said about Hank and make it sound like, I killed Hank because he got in my way, and this is what I said all along I would do to you. And the entire time he's crying in between, like, just phenomenal acting. Anthony Hopkins himself reached out to Bryan Cranston after seeing that scene and was like, "That was amazing acting." And I'm like, dude, that's Anthony Hopkins. If he's giving you credit, then you have done something right.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, for sure. It's just like that moment, like you said. I mean, I don't know what else to say besides what you just said, but it's just, do you think in that moment Skyler knew what he was doing?
I think so. The camera lingers on her early on for a long time, and I think you see this slight change in Anna Gunn's face that I think she's trying to communicate that she is hearing that. It's very subtle, and that's what's really impressive too about that side of it for her, is that she's giving these subtle hints that I think are to communicate the character's understanding exactly what Walt's doing.
Yeah. And just in that moment, well, it's like basically this episode is a slow burn of him realizing what I wanted to do failed.
Yep.
And then, like, I think that's why, he's in a couple episodes later in the finale, he has to find a way to get the money to his family without them knowing where it's from, because he's like, this is him realizing they are never going to take this meth money.
Yeah. And even if I found a way, the cops are going to take it. Like, this is evidence. There's not even a legal way for me to do this, let alone a way where they would actually want to take it to.
Yeah.
So, man, this is like, there's a reason we picked this episode. There's this reason that it's at the top of my list, because so much happens that it's like the denouement, so to speak, of his story is the final 2 episodes. Like, the other 2 episodes are slow compared to this, especially the next one, because the penultimate episode, it all takes place in Vermont, and he's alone, and it shows like the well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions sort
Yeah,
of idea. And it's terrible. Like it's heartbreaking, but at the same
yeah.
time, yeah, you brought it on yourself.
Also, you bring up a good point. Okay. Do you know this? When the government seizes like crazy amounts of money, like all this meth money, what do they do with it?
They will then utilize it for their police department. I think there's a certain amount of time that they have
Yeah.
to wait, of course, because it goes through like trial and I think it like through the trial and appeal process,
Yeah.
but eventually it does get put into police budget.
It's like I feel like with all of Walt's meth money, they could just be like, "All right, no one in Albuquerque has to pay taxes for a couple of years."
Hey, everybody, we're good. We're calling this the Robin Hood.
Yeah.
So
Anyways, that's not about this episode. That's just me wondering things.
I said that confidently because I've read stuff like that and I've read accounts of that, but of course there are people that they've actually they work on that side of it. So if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me and let me know. Or if I'm like, well, in broad strokes, you're right, but like I want to know. That's a good question. And that's
Matt,
why I
this
looked
is
it up before.
Matt, this is America. You're a white man with a podcast. You don't have to apologize for saying things even if it's not true.
And I talked about over explaining earlier. So like this is just my one chance I get in life to mansplain and no one gets to say anything.
Yeah.
A whole hour of mansplaining every week. You're welcome, America.
Yeah. See, mansplaining is when Matt says things that women wouldn't understand.
Yeah, just me. No, that's Matt-splaining.
Yeah.
It works. I make it work.
Right.
What else? Oh, so yeah. So that phone call, like
That's
I
where we go
don't
in, that's where we go into the Marie stuff that I said earlier.
yeah. Marie does really like she doesn't have a line in that scene, but we just see her break down because hearing Hank's name and oh man, can you imagine being her? Like, just think of someone that you had barbecues with and being your best friend or one of your top friends, like the guy who married your sister, or if you don't have a sister,
Yeah.
someone who's that close to you, that's a good friend that has been trusted for years, talking about how they killed the love of your life. Like, dude, wow.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Those are the words that I got for that one. No
Yeah.
mansplaining, just dude, comma, wow.
Well, and it's interesting to think like in the finale of Better Call Saul, where Marie is there at the trial of Saul Goodman, um, for Hank, like Saul is not even in this episode. He's so tertiary and had nothing to do with Hank. But at that point, he is the closest to any of the actual like Walt's dead, the Nazis are dead, Jesse's gone. Like as tertiary as he is, he's the only person that they can grasp onto and have any sort of consequences related to Hank.
I wonder how Marie would have had been in a final scene with Jesse. Like, would she have been understanding because he was trying to go after Walt? Because they had some scenes in this final season that when she came home and they were there and she had her reservations about it, but she was like, oh good, I'll bring him down, I want to bring him down. Or having seen how it all transpired, would she blame Jesse that he didn't help enough, or like that he even helped him in the first place early on? And
I don't know. That's a good question. Because I think if Hank never died, I think Marie could really have sympathy for Jesse. But I think just like how angry she was at Saul, and who had really nothing to do with Hank at all, I think, and think of how much closer Jesse was. Because I mean, I think early on, Jesse was really like taunting Hank and like really torturing him. And without having the escape of, okay, maybe we can get Walt with this, and I don't think she could go back to him on that.
Yeah, I mean, even that, if you think back to the phone call of when Hank was outside the Bounder, and then he gets a phone call that Marie's in trouble at the hospital, and like how close to home that hit for him, and he blames it all on Jesse. Like,
but did Marie ever find out about that though?
I think she did. Well, actually, I don't know.
I mean, most likely,
I just imagine because married couples they talk.
Yes, but you know how Hank is just Mr. Communication and great at all of that.
Yeah, no, it's true. He's really good at communicating. In fact, anytime Marie calls them rocks, he communicates clearly and effectively that they're called minerals.
Yeah.
All right. So
that should be on his gravestone. It's not a gravestone, it's a grave mineral.
Yeah. Stop it. All right. Well, that is Ozymandias. That is that episode. Top tier television.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know your thoughts. I feel like we were pretty in depth with stuff, but definitely feel free to let us know if there are things that we missed.
Yeah.
And also, if there are other episodes that you want to hear us talk about for this show or other shows going forward, let us know. Oh, you know which episode I would pick if we did? This is just a little glimpse into our brain. If we did a Better Call Saul one, you know which one episode I would pick from that?
I know it's gonna be obvious once you say it.
I would pick the chicanery episode. The one.
Oh, yep.
I love that. I love watching Chuck go unhinged on the witness stand and his long rant at how well it's done. I loved that moment in the show.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Because he's crazy, but he's right.
Is, and it's like it's both. Kind of like 10 Cloverfield Lane. Yeah. I love that dynamic of someone who's crazy but they're right. Like,
yeah.
I should listen to you, but there's obvious reasons I have to not listen to you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's neither here nor there. All right. So last week's trivia, we're going to jump in trivia here. Last week we talked about That 70s Show, and we asked you which cast member / character yells out the popular "Hello, Wisconsin" at the end of the title song. And I always thought for a long time it was Ashton Kutcher. Mm-hmm. I always thought it was him. And then I found out, no, it's Danny Masterson. Like, how did they make... Because even the first time I hear it, I just immediately think it was Topher Grace. And there's a couple of times I heard it, I thought it was him. I was like, no, it doesn't sound like him. It's like, it sounds at different times like any of those three guys. I don't know how, but it does. So,
you know, they could have done, they could have recorded everybody saying it and just every episode have a different person saying it. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I'd buy into that.
Yeah.
I want to hear Red say it. Hello, Wisconsin.
Yeah, like it would basically be everyone doing it in their own way. Like Leo would probably be like, huh? Hello, Wisconsin?
That's a great gag. I like that. Well done.
Yeah. All right, so this week, do you want to go with the trivia we talked about earlier?
Go for it.
All right. In this episode, there are two characters of the show who are mentioned but never seen on screen. So who are those two characters who are mentioned but never seen?
Bert and Ernie.
Yes, exactly.
You didn't realize they were in Breaking Bad, did you? Well, hey, Bert, down here in ABQ.
Today's letters are A, B, Q.
That's the one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us and giving us an hour of your day. Or if you do like I do and you listen at 2 times speed, thanks for giving us a half hour of your day.
Well, I listen to podcasts at 1.25. So do the math on that.
Like 50 minutes of your day.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
He's there, partner. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.